Hello, Floyd Brown here for the Western Center for Journalism. Today we have one of the most interesting interviews you've probably ever seen. We've got the chief investigator of Sheriff Joe Arpaio's cold case posse. That's Investigator Mike Zullo. Stick with us, we've got a lot coming up. Mike, it's great to have you with me.
Floyd, how are you today?
Good.
Good.
It has been how long now since you first started investigating Barack Obama?
We'll be going into the 25th month.
The 25th month. And now you work with and for Sheriff Joe Arpaio.
Correct.
Just tell us, how did he become interested in looking into the background and the, I guess, origin story that Barack Obama presented?
Well, actually, in the beginning, he wasn't interested. The sheriff was petitioned by a group of 250 citizens, concerned citizens, back in August of 2011. They were concerned that the birth certificate that Mr. Obama had proffered to the world as being proof positive of his birth in Hawaii was in fact a fraudulent document, and they wanted a law enforcement investigation. Sheriff Arpaio got the information, really didn't know much about the topic other than what you heard scuttlebutt through news sources, and didn't really know where to put this. He knew that he was going to have difficulty using taxpayer money to look into anything like this, and he has to his availability a posse, cold case posse, which is an investigational posse that he uses, and it's comprised of former law enforcement and attorneys and people of professional backgrounds.
Is the posse just a legacy of the Western culture here in Arizona that, you always heard in the old days the sheriff would send out the posse after the bank robber? Is that just something that stuck around from those days?
Actually, it's constitutional. The Arizona Constitution in the West, it is more prevalent than it is in the East. East Coast, they don't have an idea. I never, as a police officer in the East, if I heard this, I'd be like, what are you talking about? But it is something that's constitutional and by statute, and the sheriff has the ability to call up citizens at his will and empower them or deputize them to assist him in whatever duties he deems necessary.
Yeah. Now, your own background is in law enforcement.
Yes, I'm a former police officer, detective in New Jersey. I was an investigator in New Jersey. And coming out here, I believe I joined up with Sheriff Arpaio's organization in 2005.
Yeah. Now, we've all read a lot on the internet about how Barack Obama allegedly wasn't born in Hawaii. Some people have offered different places that they think he was born. How does a law enforcement official approach an investigation like this differently than an online journalist or a citizen that's just looking for information online? How are you governed differently?
Well, anything that we do from an investigational perspective obviously has to have corroborated evidence. You can't just go out there and level accusations and have no proof to back that up. In addition, anything we do regarding this has to be cleared through the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, and ultimately the sheriff is responsible. So we take painstaking steps to make sure everything that we are investigating is done with the utmost scrutiny and professionalism. We have to be certain before we'll ever come out and publicly make an accusation. And back in 2012, the sheriff did hold 2 press conferences, and it is our belief that probable cause does exist, that the PDF file released by the White House is in fact a forgery. It is not an official document. It has never been an official document. And it's not just the document itself, it's the circumstances around the production of this document that are highly suspect.
Okay, so you were petitioned by a group of citizens, and tell me, when you were going to first look at the document, what were the steps that you went through did you hire document experts? Just walk us through that investigative process.
Well, let me start right at Sheriff Arpaio's office. When Sheriff Arpaio called me up, he asked me to come down. He said he had something for us to do. He asked me to take a look at this. And the sheriff's own words, he goes, Mike, I don't think there's anything here. He goes, let's just look at this thing. Let's clear this document. I'll tell the world it's good, and we'll just move the country forward, because There's more important things out there. That was his mindset then. When I got this thing, we started looking at it. We were also presented with a book of evidence. There was information provided from a journalist, an investigative journalist by the name of Jerome Corsi. I looked at that information. I looked at the document. I am not a document expert. I used resources that I could find online, and to my amazement, there was layering in this document. There were anomalies in this document that really raised suspicion.
And so you, at that point, produced a series of videos where you actually demonstrated the layering in those videos, in those documents.
We did do that, but before that, what I did is I convened a group of about 11 experts, and I'm going to use that term loosely because expert today is thrown around as anybody who has any experience in anything. We're going to call them professionals. Let's put it that way. Graphics artists, people in business, physicians, and attorneys, and we put them all together in a room for a 2-day weekend, and we dissected this document as best we could, and came to the conclusion that there was, in fact, something wrong with it. And in doing that, we based our findings on the fact that the document displays so many anomalies, so many unexplainable anomalies, and even if some of those anomalies had some explanation, in the recipe that is the PDF file, it could just never be reproduced. It had to be created by human intervention.
Yeah. Now, is this are we speaking of the short form or the long form?
This is the long form.
Okay, this is the long form one that he released later.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, so you convened a group of experts, and you decided that there were anomalies in the documents. What's the next step?
The next step at that point is I had to notify Sheriff Arpaio that we were fully persuaded that it's a forgery, and that there's a real problem here. I mean, we have a piece of...
Now, it should be noted, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but isn't it a felony to post a fraudulent document on a government website?
It's a felony to even create a birth certificate in the manner that this was created.
Okay, so it's a felony to create a birth certificate.
Correct.
It's a felony to post it on a government website.
Correct.
If it's fraudulent.
Correct.
Yeah. Are there any other crimes that might or may or may not have been committed in the development of a document?
Well,
like this?
obviously there's an intent. The intent is to deceive. That's a fraudulent creation, a fraudulent intent to create this document. For what purpose?
Yeah.
And there has to be a purpose behind it. And this particular...
And we should also make note that you and the sheriff have never accused the president of any wrongdoing. It's just the people under him that may or may not have created this document, correct?
From our perspective, we are pursuing a fraudulent document, that we believe this fraudulent document was used and proffered as proof positive of a Hawaii birth event for the sole purpose of alleviating fears going into the 2012 election. We believe that's the crux of this. We also believe there were a number of factors in the motive to create the document. And aside from having to create this document, they also had to satisfy a couple other things. I mean, there was always been accusations that the president was born abroad. We don't have anything really pointing to that. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. We just don't have it. We're not pursuing where he was born. We can tell you that we don't have any evidence that he was in the state of Hawaii before the age of 5, which is problematic. But we don't have anything saying he was born anywhere else. But they had to satisfy a couple things, and especially in light of recent disclosures that his own publicist had him being born and raised in Kenya. They had to satisfy what I like to call the soil law. The Constitution is you have to be a natural-born citizen, born on United States soil, and later it was amended to territories and whatnot. They had to satisfy that. There's a motive. You needed a motive. You needed a place of birth that was in the United States to satisfy that requirement. So there's a lot of motives to create it. There was also a lot of controversy as to what hospital he was born in. And it was first purported to be Queens Medical Center. Later it was Capilani.
Now, this is actually how I became interested in it, because I wrote a book called Obama Unmasked before he was elected president. And as I was writing the section of the book where I go through the biography of the president, I actually relied on what he had written or what he had presented on his website. And all of the public documentation that I received prior to his election was that he was born in Queens Hospital. And so when his own campaign started changing the story of how and where he was born, all of a sudden sirens went off in my own mind.
Right.
And you know, I was prepared to believe him that he was born in Hawaii and born at Queens Hospital. But, you know, lie to me once, shame on you. Lie to me twice and have me believe it, shame on me.
Right.
And so that's where I first became interested in this whole controversy, was after he himself in his own campaign couldn't quite figure out where he was born. So to talk us through that.
Well, just like you had alluded to, they first purported it to be Queens. Now, my understanding is, and I haven't confirmed this, but my understanding is Queens came out immediately and said, we don't have any record of this, which is a very curious statement, because Kapolani Medical Center could never produce any birth records. As a matter of fact, they hide behind the law saying it's illegal for them to actually answer a question, was he or wasn't he? And then, lo and behold, as time went on, they've also now come up with another excuse that they destroy records after 40 years. How convenient. They destroy records after 40 years.
Well, I can tell you, I mean, I was born in the same year, 1961. And even though I don't remember my birth, since I was very young, I've known that I was born in Harrison Memorial Hospital in Bremerton, Washington.
That's right.
Okay, and so it shocked me that a man my same age, in my, you know, at that point, later 40s, and didn't know where he was born. I mean, you have to really wonder, did he not tell his campaign where he was born? Now he purportedly wrote some of these books. You know, did he not know where he was born? It just, to me, it boggles the imagination that a grown man wouldn't know what hospital he was born in.
I agree with you. It gets even worse than that. There was an infant girl born, I believe, a day before Barack Obama, died the day, I believe, Barack Obama was purportedly born, Virginia Sunohara. This little girl lived 22 hours. We went to Hawaii. I could get more medical information, more information on a 22-hour birth and death than I can on a 51-year-old sitting president of the United States. That's just absurd.
And that's as an investigator working for a law enforcement agency.
You can't get anything on this. The other thing
is
is
just a complete enigma, a complete mystery.
Empty suit kind of fits the bill.
Yeah.
You know, somebody who rises out of nowhere. I can't do an investigational background on him that would satisfy the requirements to be employed as a police officer. I can't follow the paper trail. We had problems with missing year in Columbia University. I mean, Columbia University altered their computer program to cover for this. And we leaked this information to see what the reaction was going to be, and within a week, all of a sudden Columbia came out and said, oh, the missing year was a mistake in our computer system. You can't find anything written by the gentleman. You can't find any information. And when you really start to step back away from this, and if you take this PDF file, which there is no way that this thing was created other than by a fraudulent means. There's just absolutely no way. But you take that out of the equation, take the focus off the PDF file from an investigational standpoint, and you start to look back and you go, how did this happen? There has to be a conspiracy to commit this fraud, and it's going to happen within a state. And the only state that this could happen in is Hawaii. There has to be somebody complicit in Hawaii allowing this to go on, if not more than one person. I don't think it's a vast conspiracy. It's not a conspiracy theory. This is a conspiracy. This thing made its way to the White House website, and has been shown to the American people as proof positive. The irony here is, if you look at the press conference that happened prior to the release, the president calling everybody carnival barkers that were involved in this, there's dialogue between White House counsel, and they make it abundantly clear that the president has never seen nor handled this document. Why would you say that? Wouldn't it be compelling to have the president stand up there with that birth certificate and say, this is mine, put this to bed, this is mine? That doesn't happen here.
They always keep him at arm's length from that document.
At arm's length from everything. But Benghazi, he's not even in the room.
Right.
I mean, it's everything.
Well, no, he was there for bin Laden.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. I forgot about that.
It's like, where's Waldo? He's watching bin Laden.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That's the truth.
You ascertained that document was fraudulent.
Yeah.
How do you unravel the conspiracy, though? I mean, with Watergate, there was a conspiracy to cover up the break-in of the Democratic National Headquarters.
Correct.
Here we have a fraudulent document provided to the American people, and a group of people put that document together.
Correct.
They had a conspiracy to offer this document to America. How do you unravel, a tight-knit group of people that are involved in this conspiracy? How does it come out?
That's going to be a very, very daunting task. And from the very beginning, Sheriff Arpaio, I should call him President Arpaio. Sheriff, he'd like that. Yeah. Sheriff Arpaio said in the beginning, show us the microfilm. First of all, let's prove that, yes, this thing existed in 1961. You don't get a response to that. So, moving forward, we have this PDF file that we know has problems. We have,
by the way, let's just go back to the microfilm for a minute, because those of us that are from that era, when we order our birth certificates or copies or certified copies of our birth certificate from the state that they're in, they used to always come as taken off of those microfilms,
yes.
Scans off of those microfilms. So, I mean, those of us that have a few gray hairs, like Barack Obama, we remember those things. And we know that most government records were put on microfilm.
Yes.
I'm assuming that's the same in Hawaii. They were put on microfilm.
It was mandated in Hawaii.
It was mandated in Hawaii. But yet, to date, no one has ever shared that microfilm, and I'm assuming that those microfilms weren't destroyed in mass.
Well, they shouldn't be, because they're supposed to be held indefinitely.
Right.
Is our understanding, and that leads, and opens up a whole other avenue.
So they still refuse to provide that microfilm.
They will not provide the microfilm. They will just give what he gave. Under Hawaii statute, he would have to agree, he would have to petition, and it's still up to the Director of Health to make a determination whether they're going to honor that request or not. This is why Hawaii is problematic. Hawaii is problematic in the sense that they're not cooperating with anybody but the administration. They are doing as little as possible to put an end to this.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about Hawaii. Hawaii in 1961 had just come into the United States. It had become a state in 59. And it had a time period in which it didn't really comport to the laws of a lot of different, it didn't have laws that were similar to those in the United States. And one of those was that literally, if a baby was born at home, the parent could basically come in and get a birth certificate. And it was used as a loophole that by a lot of foreigners in order to get American birth certificates. Can you just talk to that a little bit?
Well, actually it is. If the child was born at home, or actually the way Hawaii's laws were, they were compulsory in the sense that anyone can go in and just declare a birth event And they were compelled to file a birth certificate. They had to make the certificate. So anybody can come in and claim, I know and I have knowledge of a birth of so-and-so at this location, and they could just come in and state the birth. They don't have to produce any documentation. They didn't have to produce a child. They could just go in and do it. And even today, by Hawaii's standard, Hawaii gives you the ability to even self-declare. Based on some evidence, what that evidence is subjective. It's not stated what you need, but you can go in and self-declare. Now you take this whole intricate web of Hawaii statutes that basically gets so ridiculous. They have what's called a foundling certificate, a foundling report, F-O-U-N-D-L-I-N-G. This thing is still in effect. In today's time, it is amazing to me that this is still in effect. If you are walking down the street in Hawaii and you come across a child, you can literally take custody of the child. If the child's parents are unknown, you could literally give that child a name, an approximate date of birth, and wherever you found that child is going to be the place of birth. And they will create a report and a certificate.
A birth certificate.
A certificate. And at the time that's filed, that remains open. It's unsealed. If at a later date the parents are discovered, that information will then be amended and changed. Now, in today's time with child trafficking and sex trafficking and everything that's going on, Hawaii has such a liberal policy on its books. I mean, Hawaii is back in the Stone Age. Hawaii statutes are ripe for fraud. The Inspector General in 2000, I believe it was, did a report on birth certificate fraud. Everything that he said in his documentation, this is the Inspector General of the United States, every problem he recognized, Hawaii statutes fulfill. They are a problem. And Sheriff Arpaio, we tried to bring this out in our press conference as far as we're concerned. Hawaii is a new border state because Hawaii gives you the ability to be anybody and get a certificate. And by Hawaii standard, the way they do it, they are bypassing immigration law, which is only the federal government has the ability to create a citizen. The federal government has an ability for you to be born outside the United States as an American citizen and still get a birth certificate, but it's from the state, it's from the federal government, not a state. Hawaii gives you the ability to confer citizenship, because once you get that birth certificate, you can get any other document you want. You have a passport to the United States with that document. To make matters worse, during the course of this investigation, I came across some criminal activity that was uncovered by the federal government. And this occurred in New Jersey in a vital statistics office. And in the case over there, which this person was charged and ultimately pled guilty to, the director of that particular agency in New Jersey, vital statistics, a birth certificate house, if you will, literally was on the take and was being compensated by a group bringing in illegal aliens. This director of health would produce documentation and create birth files, birth records, and surreptitiously place them into her system. Once that was done, she received payment. Then the illegal alien trying to get a birth document from the United States would simply go down, produce the necessary documentation. The unsuspecting clerk would go find the record, everything appeared to be in order, and issue that person a valid United States birth certificate. It takes one person to do this. What people don't realize is that office alone, in every state, they have the ability to create a complete identity out of thin air. It takes one bad apple. And
that's an identity thief's
paradise. Paradise.
Yeah. Yeah. It's So let's get back to unrolling this conspiracy. How do we unroll it? How do you unroll it as an investigator?
Well, we continue in our investigation. And I just met with Sheriff Arpaio last week. I mean, we are going to take a different tack now in some of the information we will release. Let me just preface this first. You know, it's very unusual to do what we're doing, to conduct an investigation and as best you can try to keep the public informed. But this isn't like any other investigation. This involves the highest office in the land. It involves a fraudulent record to the man who is the most powerful man in the world. And it affects every American. So Sheriff Arpaio feels we do have a duty on a level to keep the public informed as best we can.
Yeah. Now, it's not unusual for local law enforcement to refer something to the federal level if they find out that there's been some federal crime committed. Has that been done in this case, or has the sheriff attempted to refer it to a federal, law enforcement agency like the FBI?
Where Sheriff Arpaio is in his position now, in his dealings with the DOJ, the last place you would want to put this is under control of the DOJ. They'll just either keep it open forever, they'll close it out, they'll say whatever they want to say. He's not going to do that.
So let me just probe that a little bit deeper. Is it your belief that these federal law enforcement agencies are being unduly influenced, being corrupted?
Floyd, just take a look outside. I mean, we have stuff going on in this country that has never happened. The rule of law doesn't matter anymore. People that are easily prosecuted for certain offenses are let go, while other people are crucified for much lesser offenses. I mean, there's a problem in this country. There's a big problem in the legal system of this country.
So the sheriff doesn't want to refer it to a federal agency because they'll just ignore criminal activity.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. So what Sheriff Arpaio really wants to do is he believes, as the Constitution calls for, that this is something that Congress needs to look at. Congress has the ability to unravel this.
Congress has the responsibility.
Yes, they do.
To unravel this.
Yes, they do.
And I mean, this has been one of my great frustrations from early on, has been the absolute weakness on the part of the congressional leadership. They run like scared little girls from this issue rather than doing what is their constitutionally mandated job.
Yes, and we agree with you. And there should be no reason to run for it, although the feedback that I have gotten on numerous trips to Washington from certain congressional leaders is they fear the media. They fear the ridicule. They have fallen into the same trap that communist countries use to demonize, ridicule, ostracize your opposition. They are fearful of it. Now we have a handful that aren't, one in particular.
Yeah.
But what we really believe needs to happen here, not only does Congress need to look into this, but there needs to be some mechanisms now put in place that something like this can never, ever, ever happen again. And I personally believe, not only with the President of the United States, it needs to be with every congressional member, every senatorial candidate. There needs to be a vetting of these people.
Yeah. When I was given a secret clearance when I worked in the Reagan administration, I went through a very lengthy process. In fact, I couldn't take my job for over 9 months as they were doing the FBI background check on me. And I guarantee you, I mean, they interviewed high school teachers, they interviewed people I was with in college, they interviewed family, friends, and they combed my background to find out if I was a faithful, I guess...
loyal American.
Loyal American. And yet that never happens for elected officials, does it?
No, it seems in our constitutional process, it was just automatically assumed if you were good enough to be nominated, it's because we all know who you were. And you could think about it, you go back then with the way there wasn't media like there is today, there wasn't a lot of publications out there like it is today. You know, you knew John was on the farm for 20 years before he decided he wanted to run for something.
Right.
We don't have that today. We have an obscure view of what some things in the Constitution mean, without trying to get into the whole natural-born citizen issue. I mean, nobody even knows what that means anymore. And I think it's pretty easy to read what it means, but nobody knows what it means anymore. We seem to have to rely on the judiciary to tell us what something means. But if you just go back and start reading some things 100 years ago, you get a pretty good idea of what these guys were looking to do.
Right.
We have a bad problem here. We have an erosion of the Constitution. I think what you have going on in our society today, above and beyond anything else, is the very document that united us, which was the United States Constitution, is now being demonized by one group and defended by another. So you have a group of constitutional offenders battling constitutional defenders. You can't coexist. Something has to change. Maybe it is time for an amendment. Maybe we want to elect a president that maybe doesn't necessarily have to be born here. That's not for me to make that determination. I could only give my opinion. But there needs to be that discussion. This could never happen again in this country. We should never be asking, can I see your birth certificate? Can you prove who you are? And get no response or a phony document in return.
Yeah.
That just should never happen.
With that, I think we've covered a lot of territory. Hey, I appreciate what you and the sheriff are doing. I hope you'll convey to the sheriff my deep appreciation for his willingness to take on this tough issue.
I will. Thank you very much.
Thank you.